Welcome to the video on how to develop a FAR-compliant overhead rate. An overhead rate is also known as the indirect cost rate. Once computed, an indirect cost percentage is then applied to your direct costs. Profit is then added to both. It should be noted that profit is determined by PennDOT and is not something that you need to do. What are direct costs? Costs directly associated with work you are performing for PennDOT, including employee compensation, computed on an hourly basis, travel-related costs directly related to specific PennDOT assignments, for example, attending a meeting with PennDOT personnel to discuss the project, lodging while performing approved work, and other related costs. What are direct costs? What are indirect costs? Indirect costs include things such as employee benefits, payroll taxes, office rent, office expenses, administrative expenses, utilities, professional fees, accounting, legal, etc., advertising and marketing costs, and others. These costs are costs your company incurs to do work and to support the work that you are doing for PennDOT and other clients. How do indirect costs, i.e. overhead rates, work? Well, indirect costs are computed and expressed as a percentage of direct costs. For example, if it is determined that indirect costs are 110% of direct costs, then the calculation would be as follows. Direct costs equal 10 hours multiplied by $50 per hour equals $500 in direct costs. Indirect costs at 110% of $500 total to $550. Adding direct costs to indirect costs yields $1,050. Profit is then applied at 10% to $1,050, and that equals $105. So the total invoice amount for work that you would do on behalf of PennDOT would be $500 in direct costs, $550 in indirect costs, and $105 in profit for a total of $1,155. There are two options that can be utilized to arrive at your indirect cost rate. Option one is to utilize what is described as a safe harbor overhead rate. Option one is much easier and less expensive to accomplish than other options, especially for those entities new to this entire process. Option one is likely to result in a lower overhead rate, however. Please review a separate video which discusses the safe harbor process. Option two, and the focus of this video, is how to arrive at a FAR-compliant indirect cost rate. Option two requires specialized skill and knowledge of the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, and may be difficult to complete for many firms new to this process. The good news is option two is likely to result in a larger overhead rate than option one, the safe harbor rate. And again, this video discusses option two. Who must or can use a FAR-compliant overhead rate? Consulting firms that previously had a FAR-compliant overhead rate accepted by PennDOT or any other state agency must continue to use a FAR-compliant overhead rate. In this situation, a safe harbor overhead rate is not permissible. Other entities that must use a FAR-compliant overhead rate are prime contractors, subconsultants with anticipated revenues of greater than $250,000, and even if you have not yet had a FAR-compliant overhead rate and you do not fit one of the above criteria, you may still choose to develop and submit a FAR-compliant overhead rate. So now we will begin to talk about how to develop a FAR-compliant overhead rate. First of all, ECMS provides a roadmap. To do that, you would log into ECMS, and after the initial screen of logging in should be called Login Bulletins. Scroll down to Documents for Registered Business Partners and click on the overhead information. To demonstrate this, I have logged in to the main screen at the ECMS portal, typed in my username and password, and I click Login. Now, when you're in this initial screen here, it's called Login Bulletins, as you can see up here in the upper left-hand corner. You will scroll down on this screen to the section called Documents for Registered Business Partners and go down to the second link in that section. It's called Overhead Information, and you will click on Overhead Information. When you click on that link, the screen called Bulletin will appear. And this will describe at a high level the way to develop and submit a FAR compliant overhead rate. We will talk in great detail in this video on how to fulfill each of the required tasks that are listed in this particular sheet. But I just wanted to show you originally how you would go and find most of the information, which we will talk about in the next few minutes. So the documents required to be submitted for the FAR overhead rate are listed below. Those documents in red are typically completed by a CPA firm because they require specialized expertise that you may or may not have. The documents in blue will be completed by you and or your company. So the documents are an audit report, a contractor cost certification sheet, compensation analysis, an AASHTO internal control questionnaire with attachments, and two of those attachments, the trial balance and the overhead rate schedule, are listed in red because those would typically be provided by your CPA. Another document is the company's policies for vacation, sick leave, and bonus compensation. You also need to provide a form regarding the Paycheck Protection Program. And those are the primary documents that will be needed to be submitted. We will talk about each in the coming minutes. As I said before, the CPA firm can help you navigate this process. It is extremely complicated for companies that are not experienced in developing an overhead rate. So typically, once you engage a firm, the firm will perform an audit of your books and records, and they will need things like invoices, payroll data, timesheets, etc. And this process will likely take 1 to 2 months. And you should ask your CPA firm for a cost estimate before they begin. And you may want to get 2 proposals so that you can be assured that the price they are quoting you is reasonable. So the documents provided by the CPA will likely include an audit report. The audit report will consist of an opinion letter describing the work they perform, the standards utilized, and the opinions reached, and any limiting factors. And for example, you can go to the following link and you can click that and you can get an example of what a FAR report would look like. When you click on that link, you will be brought to this home page for AASHTO. And you will then scroll down on this screen and you will find a link called the Sample FAR Audit Report. And if you click on that, you will pop up and a typical FAR audit report will appear. And of course, this is just a sample, but this is in this case, a 2-page document, which is the opinion letter that the CPA firm will write. What's not shown here are all the exhibits and the footnotes, etc. And that will be something that will accompany a audit report that is prepared on your behalf. So coming back to this page, within the audit report will be included a statement of direct labor, fringe benefits, and general overhead that will again be provided by your CPA firm. If you want to see what one of these looks like, you would go to the link that is shown here. And you will come again to the ECMS homepage. You will type in your login ID and your password. Click login. And you will come again to this screen called Login Bulletins. You will scroll down, as I discussed before, under the Documents for Registered Business Partners and click down the Overhead Information. And then you will see this screen again, and then you will drive the cursor down. And you will see way down here in the bottom under Field Pro Forma Overhead Rate, something called a Sample Overhead Schedule link, and you will click on that. And that'll bring up an Excel spreadsheet. And when you bring up the Excel spreadsheet, you will see various tabs at the bottom. And I'm clicking on table 5.5. And this will be a AASHTO sample overhead schedule. And this is just a generic overhead schedule, but this will show you ultimately what your CPA firm will accomplish on your behalf and ultimately come down with a percentage. In this case, it's 127% of direct costs is what the indirect cost rate will be. So this will be the kind of Excel spreadsheet that the CPA firm will develop to determine your indirect cost rate. And again, you can see from the level of detail, this is a complicated calculation, and it's probably a good thought to get a CPA firm in there to do this calculation. The next document that will be provided by your CPA is a trial balance. A trial balance reconciles to the statement of direct labor, fringe benefits, and general overhead that was just discussed. And as part of their audit, the CPA firm will prepare a trial balance. A trial balance is a worksheet where all of the accounts are compiled into debit and credits to ensure that the accounting entries are balanced and accurate. Again, this is something that the CPA firm will do in their normal course of business when they're auditing your work papers and your financial accounts to establish the overhead rate. The next document needs to be provided is a document referred to as the National Compensation Matrix, abbreviated NCM. The NCM is an industry tool that establishes allowable executive compensation levels. Amounts paid to executives in excess of these industry norms must be excluded from the indirect cost pool. And again, the CPA firm, if you engage them, will perform this analysis as part of their audit. If you want to see what an NCM looks like, you can click on this following link, https://audit.transportation.org. And I clicked on that link, and I am directed to the AASHTO homepage, which was previously illustrated. And you will scroll down on this page and you will get to the section where it says National Compensation Matrix. You get down a little further and it says 2022 National Compensation Matrix. And this link will be updated every year. So there will be a new compensation matrix for each year. The current year is 2022, and I will not click on that. And the following document comes up, and it's an Excel spreadsheet called the National Compensation Matrix Tool for 2022. And this is an active Excel spreadsheet. And essentially the way it works is your firm's annual revenues will be placed into this box here. And in this case, the firm revenues, for example, were $50 million. And depending upon how and what that amount is, it results in the allowable compensation to be paid for executives. And it's okay if you pay your executives more than this amount, but you would have to make an adjustment for that as part of your overall FAR compliant overhead rate. So in this case, if I wanted to change it, and let's say your firm's revenues are only $1 million, so you would put in $1 million in this box and hit enter, and it will compute new allowable executive compensation levels. And when I mean allowable, I mean as it relates to what FAR allows. And once you put in the correct revenues and you determine what the allowable executive compensation levels are, and these amounts on the far right-hand column are then transferred over to the indirect overhead Excel file that we previously discussed a few minutes ago, and compensation amounts in excess of these amounts have to be reduced from your cost pool. Again, for companies new to this process, this calculation seems like it's difficult, and conceptually it's relatively simple, but the application of it sometimes gets complicated. And again, if a CPA firm is doing your FAR compliant rate, they will take care of these types of calculations. The important thing is to know is that this analysis needs to be performed. This document, again, is the NCM tool for 2022. And again, it lists the allowable executive compensation levels. To apply this to your own particular situation, you will need to go down to the bottom of this spreadsheet and click on Menu, and then click on Example. And you will be directed to the following document. This is another Excel spreadsheet, and it takes data from the NCM tool and applies it to your particular situation. So the fields or the columns or the rows, whatever you refer to it as, in yellow will need to be prepared, and all the information needs to be compiled in this spreadsheet. And all the rows in yellow, again, need to be completed. And at the end, it will need to be signed by the authorized person in your firm to attest to the accuracy of this information. And then the information from this sheet will then again roll up into the indirect cost schedule. Now, additional documents required to be submitted for the FAR overhead rate include the contractor cost certification, the AASHTO internal control questionnaire, company's policies for vacation, sick leave, and bonus, and the Paycheck Protection Program form. These are all shown in the color blue to indicate that those are typically documents that are prepared by the company and not your CPA firm. I will go through each of these documents quickly so you have some appreciation for the document and the type of information that is being captured. The first document is a contractor cost certification. And this document summarizes the proposed overhead rate to 3 decimal points. And I cannot emphasize this point enough. Your contractor cost certification needs to be listed in 3 decimal points, and the data needs to be entered into ECMS in 3 decimal points. So for this example, the overhead rate as determined by your CPA firm is 127.543%. It needs to be signed by the company's financial officer and not by your outside accountant. And again, as an example, we can go to the ECMS website and I will show you exactly what this document looks like. So I'm back here at the ECMS login screen, typed in my user ID and my password, clicked login. And again, we'll come back to this login bulletins screen. We will scroll down and look for the link to overhead information down at the bottom left. Click that. And we are brought back to the bulletin page, which lists all of the documents and items needed for the FAR compliant overhead rate. On the left-hand side in the middle of the screen is a link that says Contractor Cost Certification, and you click on that. And you will come to this document, and this is called Appendix 3C from Publication 93. And this is one of the last documents you will complete, and you will put your firm's name, the indirect cost rate that was calculated after all of the analyses previously described are completed, the date that you're submitting this cost certification, the fiscal year period that is applicable, and then it will need to be signed by the authorized representative of your firm with the title and a date of certification. So this certification form is probably the last thing you will do, and it results in really the final stage of your calculation. The next document you will need to submit is the internal controls questionnaire. AASHTO developed this questionnaire, and they are a nonprofit, nonpartisan association representing highway and transportation departments in all 50 states. And the questionnaire covers many topics, including ownership, number of employees, company financials, but primarily it asks for questions about your accounting and financial reporting system and internal controls. And PennDOT will use this questionnaire to assess the capabilities of your firm's accounting system, and it will also use it to evaluate whether your overhead rate submittal is reasonable. If I click on this document, it will take us back to the AASHTO homepage and will tell you exactly what that document looks like. So this is, again, the AASHTO homepage, and you will scroll down on this document or on this web page and look for the link to the internal controls questionnaire. And here it is here referred to as Appendix B, internal control questionnaire. And I will click on that. And it opens a Word document. And this is what the questionnaire looks like. And it starts off with the name of the company, the taxpayer ID, where the headquarters of the company is, and a variety of other questions. This questionnaire is quite detailed, and it goes on for approximately 20 pages, and this will take some time to complete. and you would answer this to the best of your ability. And if you are seeking help answering some of these questions, you can call your accountant. Again, as I said, this document is approximately 20 pages long. And again, this will need to be completed. And at the bottom here on page 17, it needs to be signed and dated and attached with all the other documents that need to be uploaded into the ECMS portal. The next document that you would need to provide as part of your submittal is the company policy for vacations, sick leave, and bonus. Many companies have employee handbooks, and these employee handbooks cover these exact types of situations. So in some cases, it may just be appropriate for you to submit your entire employee handbook, and then these questions and these policies might be listed in there. If it's not in your handbook, you will probably have to write a memo that summarizes your policy for each of those, sign it and date that, and include that with the information that needs to be uploaded. The final document that you will need to provide is something called a Paycheck Protection Program form. This program, commonly referred to as the PPP program, which arose from the COVID-19 pandemic, is something many companies sought financial relief from the federal government. So the federal government and PennDOT wants to know if you applied for and received forgiveness for any PPP money, and that's the purpose of this form. So whether or not your company received a PPP loan and whether or not this loan was forgiven, you will need to complete it. Again, it needs to be signed by the authorized representative at your company. And if you want to see what this form looks like, you can click on, again, back to the ECMS portal, and I will do that and show you exactly where you can find this document. So this, again, is the ECMS homepage. User ID, password, click login. You will get to the login bulletin screen again. You will scroll down, click on overhead information. And you're on, again, this screen called the bulletin page. And you will scroll down to the link that says include this form with your overhead rate submission regarding the Paycheck Protection Program. So I will click on this form. And this is what that form looks like. It's a, again, it's a payroll protection form questionnaire. You put your company name, and then it goes through a series of questions of whether you applied for, yes or no, first round PPP money or second round PPP money or both. And you'll need to answer all of these questions and, again, sign the form and date the form. So that summarizes all the documents that need to be submitted for your FAR compliant overhead rate. So once you have all the documents, then what? All of the documents will need to be combined into a single PDF and uploaded to PennDOT via the ECMS portal. There is a separate training module explaining the mechanics of submitting your FAR compliant overhead rate via the ECMS portal. I will show you now where to find that video which describes that upload process. So I will click on this link, which is the homepage for ECMS. Back to this screen again, type in the password. Click Login. Back to the Login Bulletins page. Scroll down, Overhead Information. Click Overhead Information. You come back to the Bulletin page, and I know you've seen this several times by now. Hopefully it will become second nature. And you will run all the way down to the bottom of this screen, and you will see this link for Successful Overhead Rate Submission. And if you click on that link, you will be brought to another video that describes how to go and upload all of the information that I just described. Some of what you find in that video will be repetitive to things that we have discussed here today, but hopefully between this video that I just went through and this additional video in the ECMS portal that explains how to upload this information, you can be successful in getting your overhead rate submitted properly and approved in a timely manner. So, concluding remarks are as follows. Until and unless your overhead rate is submitted and approved, you cannot be approved for any work. You cannot perform any work. You cannot invoice for any work. You cannot be paid for any work. So therefore, applying for your overhead rate is one of the first tasks you should perform after you register for work with PennDOT. And the final thought is that if you choose to go down this route of a FAR compliant overhead rate, your first submittal to PennDOT may not be approved. There may be things missing or forms filled out incorrectly. And what will happen is PennDOT will inform you that additional information is needed, and they will specifically identify what information you need to upload. And hopefully between their comments and your supplemental information, your overhead rate will be approved in a timely manner. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.